Hi, everyone. I'm Zoe Black, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Ethan Smith, CEO of Graphite.
I'm excited to be here. The landscape is changing very quickly. This is one of the most exciting times to be a creator. And so I'm excited to chat about how creators can take advantage of AI.
Let's start with the basics. We're hearing all these acronyms: AO, AIO, SEO, GEO. Can you break down the difference between all of them and explain why this is so top of mind right now?
Yes, so there's I would break it down into three different things. So there's Google Search, there's AI overviews within Google Search, and then there's LLMs, and each has their own different acronyms. So optimizing for Google Search is called SEO, search engine optimization. So if you're a business, how do you make sure that you show up in Google Search? Then there's AI overviews, which Google launched after ChatGPT launched. And so that's AI overview optimization. Some people call it AIO, but how do we show up when there's an AI overview summary of the search results? And then the last is LLMs. How do you show up in LLMs? And that's the thing that is the most exciting right now and changing. There's a few different names for that. There's AEO and GEO. They both mean the same thing. I think the community will decide which of them they pick, but one stands for answer engine optimization, the other for generative engine optimization. I personally am choosing answer engine optimization because I think it's a more precise definition, but essentially it means how do I have my product show up in LMs?
So why is it so important for creators and businesses to start learning about this now?
There's a couple of reasons. So reason one is that the channel is growing very fast. It's probably the largest growing channel in the last 10 years within marketing. And so we've seen ChatGPT launched in November 2022, but we didn't see a surge of impact from that channel until earlier this year, around January, where we saw a huge increase in the usage of LLMs and then also the clickability of the answers within LLMs. So since January, we've been seeing this huge increase in impact, largest I've seen in the last 10 years. And so the first reason is because of the timing. The second reason for creators that's interesting is that if you think 10 years or 20 years out with AI and you ask who wins, there's two different groups. And the first group are the foundational AI companies like an Anthropic and an OpenAI and a Gemini. And so that's one group. And then how do you win? How does everyone else win? How does a creator win? And so everyone will have access to the same core foundational algorithms. And so if you're a creator and you have the best content, that creates a better output. And so creators especially are positioned to win in AI if they have the best content.
This is where it gets exciting for us. What role does video play in this new world of SEO and AI? And what are some of the big industry trends that you're seeing?
The biggest trend that I'm seeing is the top cited domains in citations are UGC content and video content. LLMs are making a strategic decision that the best content comes from real people. It doesn't necessarily come from a corporation. It comes from real users. And so we're seeing a huge trend in social and video content being part of citations. And I think that that's just going to continue. And part of the reason why, and especially video, is interesting because a lot of the information in video is still not fully accessible by the LLM. LLMs don't have full context in the content within the video. So as that unlocks, it becomes an even more interesting data set. But the general trend that I'm seeing that I think is just starting is UGC and video content as a key input into LLMs. So one interesting theme is that there was a lot of discussion about AI replacing people, and creators were concerned, and actually we're seeing the exact opposite happen. So we did a study where we looked to see, is AI generated content appearing in Google search, because people said that Google was filled with AI content. And actually what we're seeing is Google search, also ChatGPT, heavily favors human content, and the more unique and authentic, the better.
So before we get into best practices, there's a lot of misinformation out there about SEO and AI. What are some of the top myths that you can debunk for everyone?
Yeah, so there's a few. The first one is that for LLMs are going up, and that means search is going down. And actually what I see is that as these new channels emerge, it's additive. So there's TikTok, there was a lot of buzz about TikTok search is being used a lot, and therefore Google goes down. Or before that, there was Instagram, before that there was Facebook. Every few years there's a new channel. And then the argument is that that new channel growing necessarily means that another channel, Google search, is going down. And so what I see is that it's additive. And actually, as a creator, that's great because the pie is getting bigger. And so LLMs is yet another channel. And so how I think about it is that all of these channels are ones that you should optimize for, and they're all additive. So that's the first myth. The second myth is that there's a small number of domains that the LLMs favor, and so you need to be on Reddit and YouTube, and those are the only channels that matter. And actually what we're seeing is that both search, Google search and LLMs, there's many, many different domains. I think that the mistake is that when there's things published and you see the top 10 domains, they are the largest ones, but there's a large variance in the domains that are being used across LLMs. So as a creator, my recommendation, as I mentioned, all the channels are additive, is to publish your content on as many of these channels as possible. So publish your content on Reddit, publish on Quora, X, YouTube, Instagram, Vimeo, TikTok. Like, take advantage of as many of these channels as possible. There's no reason why you need to pick one. Pick as many as possible to amplify your content as much as possible. The third is that this new channel is completely different. So TikTok is completely different from Google. Instagram is completely different from Google. That's not really true. These are all search engines, essentially. And so these are all ways to search and discover content. And so there's different nuances depending on the channels, but the underlying strategies generally are the same thing, which is, if you're going to create content, figure out what are the most popular topics people are interested in. What questions do they have? Same strategies apply for LLMs, same for Instagram, same for TikTok, same for Google search. It's the same core strategies that work across all these different channels.
What actionable advice do you have for creators, marketers, small business owners to optimize their content from an SEO AI standpoint?
So another example would be a local example where I want to have an exercise studio. And maybe I want to have an exercise studio that's an alternative to Pilates. And so there's spin cycle, there's the core method, there's Hillary's Soto method. So how would you optimize for that? And again, what question would you want to show up? So you'd say Pilates alternatives New York. And then you'd figure out, well, what is showing up for these different things? What you'll see is listicles. So you'll see other roundups of Pilates alternatives, and you would want to show up on all those. The second thing you would want would probably be local content on your domain, talking about Pilates alternatives in New York. You might have a landing page on your site. You might have a video talking about your different methods and why it's better. So you'd want a business listing page with your address and a description of everything that you do. I would also ask your customers who are coming to your studio what questions they have about your studio, how they found you, and maybe what made you unique versus the others, and then repeat that back on your landing pages. Because again, how do we know what questions people have? We don't actually know. ChatGPT doesn't tell us the questions that people have, but real people will tell you the questions that they have. So ask your customers, how did you find me? And what questions did you have? And why did you pick me? And then create content around that. And you could create Reddit content, get mentioned in listicles, videos talking about all that. That's how I think about it.
Ethan, can you talk to me about businesses hosting content on YouTube and or Vimeo and the advantages, disadvantages?
Yeah, so again, it comes back to control and where does the traffic go? And I don't think that there's a correct answer. It's really just a question of what's your preference. And so there's sites where the traffic goes to those sites. So Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, the traffic always comes back to those sites. And you might have an embed and you can put the embed in your site, but ultimately the traffic goes to those platforms. And there's benefits to that because you can get distribution within those platforms. The downside is that you don't have control over that. And the traffic doesn't go to you and your owned site. And so with a Vimeo or with a Substack or some of these other platforms, you own the traffic. So the traffic isn't going to some other place, the traffic is coming to you. So it's really just a question of strategically, do you want the traffic coming to you? Do you want it going somewhere else? I think both make sense. The nice thing about owning the content is that, again, you have the control over that. And so as the LLMs grow and as the usage grows and as your corpus of your content grows, there's potentially strategic benefits to you own and you have complete control over your content, but ultimately it's just a personal preference about what you want to do with your content.
So as we wrap up, what does this landscape that's moving so rapidly look like a year from now?
So a couple things. I think number one is that there'll just be way more usage. The slope of the adoption curve is very steep. So the channel will get larger and larger. The second thing is whenever there's a new channel, there tends to be early adopter people who become big on those channels. So as Instagram comes out, TikTok comes out, there are early adopter creators who get huge on those channels. And so I think the same thing with LLMs. The early adopter first movers can really come in and saturate the market and sort of ride the wave as LLMs grow. And so that's what I think it looks like a year from now, which is a much bigger channel and then brand new people who become the influencers for that channel.
Ethan, we've talked through a ton today. We appreciate all the insights you provided. To synthesize, what are top takeaways that you would share with our businesses and creator audience?
Yeah, so a few things. The first thing is that the channel is large and it's growing quickly, number one. So it's a very interesting channel. The second thing is that there is a first mover advantage. And so getting in now, you can ride that wave. So the third thing is that the models really like user-generated content and video. And so this is a key differentiator for to optimize for LLMs is focusing on UGC and video content and then optimizing across all the channels. You don't need to pick one channel. You can create content and go channel by channel and repurpose that content across all the different channels.
Thank you, Ethan, for joining us. We're truly grateful for sharing how creators and businesses can win in this evolving landscape. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Thanks for having me.